Dr. Power, the guest has arrived.
Oh, thank you, Bonnie Castle. Hi, folks. Come on in. Have a seat. There's room for two over here. So I'm so glad you joined me today. This is the first of our Smoke Cat sessions for our session. I hope you enjoy them. We'll have 8 of these, and they form the discussions that we'll have in class. Not the only things we're going to talk about, but some of the issues that we take out of the paper. And I have to take them. Today's a Wednesday prior to the course start on Monday, so we're a couple of days behind the actual, whatever the current status is of the stories we talk about. So build on them and add any other stories you'd like to talk about. The Smoke Cat sessions is something that in Oxford, the Don, the prof, had chambers, sort of quarters, and you did readings there. You didn't so much sit in a classroom, but you'd come down, and the Don would have a small cluster like this of 6 or 7 people around, and through cigars and pipes and port and glasses of sherry, they would talk about issues like we're going to talk about today. And it's through the Socratic dialogue that we exchange ideas and challenge each other and test each other's hypotheses that we tend to get some firm terrain to stand on as through critical thinking and reflective thought, that I'm satisfied with my position. I can defend it. And in this course, that's all we ask you to do. There's no wrong or right answers. Just have some good, hard, reflective thought. And if you're satisfied that your view of the hand is the right view of the hand, then that's where I want you to stand. And it's the same on the exam. There'll be nothing I say that is the correct answer. As long as you can give me evidence-based support for your position, you've met the requirements of the course. I don't want you to be overwhelmed with the course. Those of you who had a chance to go in and do a quick scan of the vast array of materials in here, there's a lot. So go directly to the deliverables and see what you have to produce. Just that will get you your mark that you need to have a mark to go through the system. Anything else is bonus. And I had to design it that way. When Pedro came to me and said, Terry, can you take this from a face-to-face class to an online class and keep the standard, I felt quite challenged and frankly wasn't happy about it. I enjoy the face-to-face teaching and the Socratic dialogue and the interaction and the fast moving of a class environment, and it's hard to replicate that into a online situation. But having said that, not just personally me working on it, but really a collection of a wonderful bunch of people like Bonnie Castle that just announced your arrival, and others work hard every week to get these discussions to edit and to help me put in the course these rich materials. And I've done it deliberately in the sense that I've had a chance to scan your backgrounds, your bios, both cohorts, and it's interesting. We have such a vast array of folks who are very skilled in strategy, do it almost on a daily basis. Terms like goals, objectives, visions, strategic inflection points, that language, that lexicon will be well known to those folks. There are others of you that I sense this will be rather new, and there'll be a bit of a ramp-up curve to get to understand some of these terms and concepts and notions. And so what I've done is said to everybody, here's the basics in the deliverables, do that, that's all that you're required to do. But for those of you that are already well down the road and becoming strategic practitioners, I put a bonus section in there. And go in there and have a look. It's not required for the exam, but you'll find a whole bunch of rich things in there that may help you in your day-to-day job. For example, in the second session, I guess, we give you a little red toolbox with about 40 some odd tools in there that you'll use throughout the program, and many in this course. But for those in the bonus section, I put another 100 tools in there in another box. And more than you'll ever need in your lifetime, but for those interested in strategy and have a passion for it, like I have a passion for it, go in there and have a look around. But the bonus section you'll find rich with materials to look at your pleasure, but do a time appreciation. You need balance in your workplace, balance in your life, and as long as you do the deliverables, I'll be happy. Specifically on the deliverables for these discussion sites, I'd like to make the point that all I expect from you is 2 meaningful posts in a week. 2 meaningful posts in a week. That's not hi, how are you, but that's reflective thought, adding some value, some capital, intellectual capital to the class, and do that for us, and you've met the requirement. That's not to say a number, I've had it in the past, will do 30 or 40 posts in the week because they have a passion. They're enjoying the topic, they're enjoying the flow of the discussion, and I don't want to stifle that. I want you to do that. I want you to enjoy the course and get something out of it, and I'll work with you. But for those that say, look, I've got other things to do and my time is quite tight, just give me 2 meaningful posts on the discussion sites, and you've met the requirements. So that should be helpful in that regard. Critical correctness. I challenge you a little bit on this. I tend to poke the bear a little. There's no political correctness in this class, as long as we're respectful of each other. So we have Muslims in the class and we have Christians in the class, and if we can't have this clash of civilizations, if we can't have these conversations in an academic environment, in a respectful, fair and balanced way, where in the world are you going to have these discussions so you can truly understand? I mean, for example, if I held up my hand and asked you to describe what you see on this side of the hand, you'd probably say, well, an old arthritic hand of a 73-year-old with a ring on it. But if I turned it around here and asked you to describe it, I think you'd agree with me, you'd have to describe it a little bit differently. And so that's what we have to do in this class, is we have to come around from this side of the hand that we view the biases, the way we perceive the world, and come around to this side of the hand and try to stand on that terrain for a few minutes and view the world and get a sense of it. And we're going to do that a lot in this class. That's the only way to establish this critical thinking. And indeed, you may even wonder why in a strategy course are we looking at these emerging issues. And it's because we need to understand the water in the bathtub. If we don't understand the what's about to emerge through the fog and mitigate the damage or exploit the opportunities these changes are going to make in our strategy, in our businesses, and indeed in our lives, then we are not doing our job and what you're being paid for. And most of you are being paid for one thing at your work, and that's to be strategists, to help lead your company. And so we'll talk more about that as the course unfolds. I think I've covered all the points that I wanted to cover, other than say that I'm available to you. I'll work with you. I want you to have some time with your families, and I mean it sincerely. And this is not meant in my course to be a boot camp. It's meant to have some downtime on the weekends. But I accept there's a number of you working so hard during the week, you must do the work on the weekends to get through the course, and I accept that. But I'm saying to most people, I'll expect that it's Friday night. I don't expect to see you around on the weekends. I want you to spend some time with your families, to do what you have to do, but get some downtime and join me again on Monday morning. For those of you that have to work on the weekends, because you can't get it done during the week, I'll be there, I'll be available to you and working with you on the weekends and doing some posts and answering some of your questions throughout the weekends. But as many of you as can, I do underscore the importance of you getting some downtime with your family, because it's putting great stress on the family and on your children, those that have them, and I want you to spend a little time with them. I'll be available to you anytime you want to call, 250, make a note, 250-472-3836, 472-3836 in Victoria. And I've got a better office at home than I have here on the campus, and so I tend to work on these online courses from my home for the next 8 or 9 weeks. And so most of the time you'll find me at that number unless I'm in at my office here doing meetings and other work. Well, that all being said, let's go to the paper now and see what's in today's. And I'm doing this on a Wednesday, and you get to see it officially Tuesday this week with a holiday on Monday. And so it may be a little stale dated, but that's the way it has to be in order to get the video made as for these sessions. Of course, today the big talk is in Brussels and the bombing that took place over there. And there was an interesting article a book put out by a fellow called Samuel P. Huntington in 1993, and he foretold at that point, his whole hypothesis was that there'd be a clash of civilizations between a number of cultures, but primarily between Muslims and Christians. And he said the wars won't be between countries any longer, it'll be this clash of civilizations. I think I have the link up on the site in the bonus section if you're interested in reading it, but it's although Donald Trump didn't put it quite so eloquently as Huntington did, and it's been received good marks, the Huntington article, that it is a concern that the clash of civilizations, that the Muslims have within their religion things that don't align well with things that are within the Christian religion, and that's bound to cause these points of friction. And we might talk a bit more about that as it goes on this week. A good little article, BC in British Columbia, for those in our province. We've had some marvelous transplant improvements and lists, maintaining lists, and so there was a young woman saved when her first transplant failed within hours of dying because of the efficiencies of the new transplant list, is now recovering and doing well. And it speaks to the importance of transplants for all of us to give some consideration to that, no matter what particular organ you're doing, but it certainly has been well received in BC. All right, let's court vacancies. The Thomas Cromwell is going to leave our Supreme Court. A young man, he's only 63, and they can certainly stay till 75. So he's packing it up rather early, but it's going to give Justin Trudeau the opportunity to appoint a replacement. And of course, with what's going on in America on replacements for their Supreme Court and the balance between the left and the right, it's rather tenuous. Not quite so prominent in Canada. We don't be quite so politicized. But nevertheless, this one might be transparent. The last three that were appointed by Harper were done with the Prime Minister's office only doing it, and a very short cursory statement as to why those three Supreme Court justices were selected. And there's no vetting process, nothing else. Just the Prime Minister says the sky is blue. Here's your new Supreme Court justice. And so we'll watch with interest, see who it is and what side of the hand they lean towards. President Obama was in Castro, as we know, yesterday, next week, the last week for you folks, and there's some things that we could talk about. It's the last time, I think it was 88 years ago, that a sitting president in the States went to Cuba. So it's been some period of time, and it's been just under 20 years. I remember when it happened. The embargoes went in place on Cuba, and it's been a telling story. But I think the couple of things that come out of that, one is that I think Castro brothers would not be in power after 19 years had the American government not put the sanctions on, because whenever you get a Praetorian system of this nature, whether it be North Korea or Cuba or some of that vintage, all they have to do is say the Americans are at the gate, and the populace tends to come around and surround the leadership and keep them in power because of the fear of the ugly Americans banging on the door and coming into the country. And so my sense is that had America acted sooner, I suspect the Castro brothers would have long since disappeared off the world stage. But just a thought, but worth a discussion. But certainly, I think we've kept them in power. And I have to warn. President Obama right now is talking about his legacy and what will be in the history books about him and what he's done. And I think the other thing he's got in his agenda with respect to Cuba, and I have no authority for this, just some of my readings and thoughts, is relates to Guantanamo, whether he will actually give that back. There's a 99-year lease with a good part of it yet to run, and I think he would like to surrender that base, close it, and pass it back to the Cubans and get out of Cuba. And of course, that flies in the face of this war with ISIS and Al-Qaeda. Of course, it's not staying stagnant, it's growing, as we saw in Brussels. It's getting larger through all of northern Africa, etc. And there's a need for some sort of a venue to hold combatants, and where are you going to keep them if you don't keep this base open? So things we could look at today is Cuba and some of the ramifications of what's taking place there is an interesting thought. The budget comes out on Tuesday, so this is rather timely. In essence, the Globe today provides a good overview of that. At first, the concern for most of us who are on the right wing of Attila the Hun are concerned about almost $30 billion in deficit spending. $30 billion in a country with only 34 million people is a big number, particularly when over the past number of years there's been a real concentrated effort to balance budgets and get back into step and pay down our debt. And it was recognized globally, and strength of the Canadian dollar was seen as a suitable minor vehicle currency for people to buy and put money in, along with Australia of that nature. And I think this is going to impact the value of the Canadian dollar. I noticed in today's paper, which is before the budget, that the dollar loonie is still going up. It's today it's somewhere in the order of 76.7, so it's almost 77 cents. And I suspect the time you read this, that as a result of the budget on Tuesday, our loonie will fall. Because the perception of the other nations, they'll not be happy about this, what amounts to be quantitative easing and spending money. Child tax benefits going up, $2,300 for those with youngsters at home going in. Public transit, they're going to put in public-private partnerships, infrastructure spending. The lion's share, of course, is going to Ontario and Quebec. But I did note another article, not in this paper, but about $425 million, I think, is coming to BC. Affordable housing, unemployment insurance is being increased to those regions where they have commodity workers. And I think this is focused primarily on the folks who are in Alberta and have been laid off and waiting to come back on. So if you're fishing lobster or an oil worker in fishing lobster in the Maritimes or oil workers in the prairies, your benefits may increase by an extra 5 weeks if that happens. Indigenous people, veterans, I'm pleased with this. The vets are going to get another $3.7 billion this year. For those that are disabled, not vets like me that just have a few minor disabilities, but those that actually incurred serious on the battlefield are going to get some benefits. And it's about time. And they're opening up 9 more veterans offices, and it's something I'm a proponent of, that vets need to receive better treatment than often we give them. Post-secondary education, they're going to increase the amounts of student grants, and of course, it's something we could talk about, that every time this organization, Royal Roads or some other institution, knows that your student loans go up, it doesn't take much imagination to understand that our fees are going to go up because the marketplace can sustain the increase. If student fees went down, if student grants and loans were to go down, I would think that most institutions have to find some way to wring the pennies out of the value chain and to drive our costs down by getting rid of things like sports fields and Philharmonic punting societies, and just get back to the core things of teaching. Maybe happen. So I'm not sure the idea of putting more money into student loans and things of this nature that has to be paid back by the student, or grants in that case, will have any lasting benefit. I think it's a temporary thing, and this time next year prices will go up in institutions to accommodate the extra money you now have in your pocket for those that have that sort of loan. CBC Radio is going to get another handout of almost $700 million, and I think that's worth a discussion. Do we need the CBC any longer in this day of social media and Twitter and online and news? And I'm going to talk a bit later on today about the Internet of Things. I call it the Internet of Everything, and how important it is and the changes it's making. I'm not sure that we need the CBC Radio, but it's worth a discussion. Initially, when it was put in, it was the idea of welding Canada as a block unit, as to afford the amenities to Canada's north that wasn't available. But today, with the Internet of Everything, they don't need the CBC Radio, and we don't need to spend $700 million year after year on handouts to support the CBC. But I could be wrong. There's no wrong, right answers in this class. I'm just curious for a discussion. Counter-radicalization, that $35 million is going on to respond primarily in Ontario and Quebec under the Bill C-51, the Anti-Terrorism Act, Canada's Anti-Terrorism Act. They're getting some money in there to try to bring down the temperature with those enclaves of Muslims and others that may have this sense of disjointment, of not being part of the Canadian mosaic, and trying to incorporate and culturalize and make them part of Canada. And the refugees that are coming in are going to get another $300 million, $245 million, Syrian refugees, to help support them coming in and give them what they need by way of accommodation and other things. So that's where your money's going. And is the budget as a whole a good thing? Are you happy with the deficit? Not happy with the deficit? We could talk a bit about that. The paper, too, talks about public opinion in the BRICS, and that's the potential exit by Britain from the European Union. And it was about 33%, but with this bombing the other day that took place in Brussels, and the growing immigration challenges that Sweden, Greece, and Germany and the nations there face, given their open borders, the population, the polls suggest that the appetite for Britain getting out of the European Union has increased to 36%. And so it's interesting to watch that. The pound, as a result of this poll, dropped in relation to the American dollar. What else do we have in here? Yeah, they made a point here, too. They say that Brussels is the de facto capital for the EU, which it is, this new world order, this sense of globalization all being centered by this non-elected body over there in Brussels. But the jihadists find that very comforting. It's become the unofficial capital for the bombing and terrorists to go to Brussels. And the reason they gave here in the paper is that it's probably safer for them there, melded and hidden among the enclaves of immigrants and others there, than it is, say, sitting in Syria or Afghanistan where there's bombing and things of that nature taking place. So they come out of those countries and swirl away in the streets and the backyards of Brussels until needed. An interesting observation that we could look at. I also noticed, too, when the raids took place following the Brussels bombings, the raids all took place during the day. As an old soldier, that was interesting because normally with the advantage of that the American system has and we have in Canada as a night vision goggles, sometimes it's best to use the night as your safety thing because the opponents probably don't have night glasses. And so you can see like daylight when you go into these homes to go in and search. But it was interesting, they conducted daytime raids, and I can only assume that was because of the fear they have of what they're walking into. It's very terrifying because they don't know whether the whole house will go up and what triggers are set there to go. And so just an observation that they were daytime raids as opposed to night raids, which I thought in most cases we would have could have done. Province banning cards in Ontario. I don't know how many we have yet in our class from Ontario, but they have this idea of what do they call them? Carding, where they simply go up to anybody in the street, but generally it's a racial thing of a Muslim or a black or somebody looking just out of character, and they stop and say, produce some evidence of who you are, name, rank, and number, and they've been getting away with that under the terrorism legislation and things we have in place, which flies in the face of civil human liberties and things of that nature. And now they're rolling it back a little bit, and they say, okay, we can do that, but you've got to give a reason why you're doing it when you request the information from anybody you stop in the street. And then there's a whole bureaucracy of paperwork that takes place to follow up as to why you stopped. There's a paper trail as to the sky wasn't just blue. I wanted to stop Billy out there, but I stopped Billy for all these reasons, and it's documented. And then, of course, with that goes the cost of 26,000 officers are going to have to be trained on the regulations to accommodate this new process. And so that's an interesting story. And I guess things that comes out of this is not just in this case, but is it are we going too far? Are we getting too wrapped up in this? I mean, the bombing and everything else. Yes, it's tragic that over 30 people died in the Brussels situation, some Americans, and over 200 were wounded. It's quite significant. But 2 weeks ago, we had a bus go off a bridge with 30 people died. And I'm just wondering if are we going too far on all this stiffening of borders and carding people, and are we just taking it one step too far? We could talk a little bit about that. As to what we think about it. Bombardier is looking at another handout. Quebec firm competes primarily in the same field that Brazilian airline industry Embraer competes in. They've had over the last 20 years an endless stream of tax dollars and grants and to bolster up the economy because they have a large job and a large lobbyist function with the governments, and so they're talking in terms now of a handout from the Quebec government, from the federal government, to maintain Bombardier with the C-series plane that they have, which is stumbling a little bit. And there's no question, there's a lot of jobs involved, so there's arguments can be made on both sides. But my question is it time to let Bombardier go, or do we need to keep putting money at this to maintain Bombardier's presence in Canada and the airline technology in Canada, or should we go on and put the money into something like alternate energy? Could Quebec folks produce new solar power and wind power and become among the pole positions on that? Just a question for discussion purposes. Saudi arms deal, $15 billion worth of armored personnel carriers we're making just outside London, Ontario, and we're shipping them off to Saudi. At the same time, we chastise the Saudis for human rights, and so the question is, can we have our cake and eat it too? We could talk about that arms deal with the Saudis and what's more important, human rights or the economy? And keep in mind, Canada's economy, and that's what the budget's all about, is is sputtering a little. We're down just over 1% GMP forecasted, and it wouldn't take much to push us into a recession. Business, what do we got here? The dollar is up, as I said, close to 77 cents. Gold's up almost $12.50. Oil's just over $40 a gallon. We have talked about the business. The small business is interesting. They really let us down in this for those. Small business is the economic engine, in my mind, for Canada. It's the mom and pop shops, the loan practitioners, it's the small firms out there that are making jobs and getting up and going, and they come and rotate with some regularity. Their life cycle is such. But the Liberal government has broke the promise that the Conservative government put in, that they were going to drop the tax on small business down to 9%. And the Liberals have made it clear that with this new budget coming in, any small business with $500,000 a year in earnings is going to be taxed at 10.5%. And over the period of time, that amounts to $900 million taken from small business between now and 2019. It's almost $1 trillion is going to be clawed back, which will help go off this deficit of where they're spending the money. And that's 3.5 million businesses in Canada qualify as small corporations, and 2.4 million of those are small, independent, self-employed folks, and they're going to pay a little premium. Foreign buyers in real estate, certainly it's an issue here in Vancouver and Victoria and Toronto. The price of real estate is, I think I'm right in this when I say the price of an average home in Vancouver now is in excess of $1 million. And the normal Canadian husband and wife working really can't afford $1 million home and $1 million mortgage and bring up youngsters and do it. So it's foreign buyers are coming in and putting their money there because Canada's a safe place. And places like China are putting up regulations and constraints to obstacles to get your money out of the country. But they're finding ways through Hong Kong and that to get it over here. But they're buying these properties up and sometimes just letting them sit idle, and that's a problem too in the story. So they're putting up $500 million, $500,000 into a study, Ottawa, to find out a little bit more details about where this, what we can do about this foreign buyers buying real estate and how significant is it. CRTC up again, talking about cable packaging, and again, just my observation there. Certainly, I guess on the surface level, the idea of Shaw and TELUS and the cable packaging and the Apple TV, all that stuff is out there. And so now consumers are in a place we can do some negotiating, some bundling, and drop our prices down, because right now these idea of they have little choice but take 100 channels, and you may only watch 14 or 15 of them. Up to now, it's been difficult to say, just give me the 14, 15. But under the new system, we may be able to haggle a little bit and get a little tighter control over our monthly expenditures for TV. But at a secondary level, again, the CRTC, I mean, that was brought about in the 50s and the 60s with the idea, the threat of the American culture, their radios, their television, their newspapers coming in here around the Diefenbaker time in the early 60s, coming in here to just inundate us with American culture. And so they said, no, let's have a CRTC commission set up that can control the televisions, the radio waves, and make sure we play lots of Anne Murray and Gordon Lightfoot on the radio to make sure there's a balance of Canadian talent and make it fertile for Canadian talent to come up through the system and not just get swamped by Americans. But again, the story is the world has shifted, has changed, and today you have those sort of options of going online, internet of everything, and I'm not sure we need to pay the fees we pay to have a CRTC commission and all that entails to talk about television. China's still on the hunt for Canadian energy, notwithstanding the oil prices at about $40, which is just marginal for most Canadian firms to break even. But they're still over here looking, but they're slowing down, and the Chinese economy is slowing down. Their GNP this year is forecast to be about 6.5%, where it normally runs about 8%, and that has some impacts that we'll talk about in this course and how it relates to our businesses, but we want to look at that. But they're saying China's still looking to buy more Canadian, but the sense of urgency has gone out of it, where before they were rushing to grab and grasp all the oil resources they could, not just in Canada but globally. The appetite is wearing off a little bit. Paper talks here about Canada's trade priorities need to be reset. And of course, Canadians are generally lazy. That with the NAFTA agreement, it's been easy for us because of the culture, the laws, the reciprocal agreements in taxes and lawsuits and things like that. Most Canadians would prefer just to do business with our American cousins back and forth. And at one point, we had a high of between 84-86% of everything we exported in Canada went to the States. So it was a no-brainer. It was easy to do. But that economic interdependence has weakened us in our negotiating position when we want to do something different that the Americans don't want us to do. It puts us in a very bad negotiating position. And so there's been a conscious effort, particularly over the last 10 years, to decouple from America, from that 86% interdependence. Today, as I speak to you, I think we're down around 72%. We're still economically interdependent with them, but the numbers are coming down, which is a good thing. And this article was on to talk about the importance of us with CETA, the trade agreement with Europe, and the Trans-Pacific partnership that's just been announced in secret. The importance of those to help us carry on with that decoupling and find other businesses, particularly China. Only about 1% of what we do goes to China at the present time, and it's capable of a much bigger. I mean, China's got as an emerging middle class, a population bigger than all of America. Over 300 million people are deemed to be middle class in China right now. And they weren't there at the time of 1978 when the bamboo curtain came down. But now they're competing with you and I for that steak, for that lobster, for that, I've got the name of the little crustaceans they have in Nova Scotia, but they're practically eaten out. It'll come back to me. In any event, the idea here is the importance of Canada resorting out its trade priorities and looking someplace other than the States. Takes more work to understand the cultural sensitivity and dealing with these other nations, but they're suggesting that it's important that we do this, and I certainly agree. But no wrong or right answers to this class. What are your thoughts? Why don't we talk about that? Well, this was a good story. The bombing that took place in Brussels the other day, you would think that wouldn't have any great impact on Canada, but it did. Were you aware that, where's my little note to myself in the paper here? The Ontario Teachers' Pension Plan invested in that particular airport. I'm looking for it madly. It doesn't jump off the page at me. But they normally, teachers' pension plans get into these public-private partnerships. They buy toll roads, they buy airports, they buy these just cash cow generating things, safe things going on. But they happen to be, one of them they bought was this airport. And I can't see what they paid, but they bought the airport, and now they're losing money as a result of that. They're going to lose some money as a result of that. And so it's important, I guess, that with our teachers' pension funds and terrorists, that we give some consideration to what's in our portfolio and what are the possible impacts of global terrorism and other things too. We're going to talk about in this class, the American vehicle currency, the economic interdependence, what's happening in Europe, the Brazilian engine collapsing down below where before the China's softness going on right now. All that impacts because of, like a spider web, a tug on one strand impacts all of us, and we need to understand that in order to craft strategies. So anyway, it was an interesting little story here with the Canada pension plans. I've just learned a lesson that it's not as safe as they thought these public-private partnerships, etc., were. In Jakarta, cabbies are protesting ride-hailing apps. Well, of course, that's the Uber and things that we've experienced here in Canada. But it's not just that story about the taxis in Jakarta. The important thing is the Internet of Everything and the impact it has on us. It's going to change every one of your businesses and your business models in every industry. And if you want to talk sometime, give me a call. I'll talk about your industry and tell you some of the changes that are coming. Now, to that end, I want to talk for a few minutes now about the Internet of Everything and draw your attention. I'll make sure you get it. It's in the bonus section. I put a 1-hour video, which is some of the highlights of my new book coming out on the Internet of Everything, and I call it Through the Looking Glass, because once you step through that, there's no way you're going to get back. So let's talk now a little bit about the Internet of Everything. Let me say this, if I can, that I don't want you to be frustrated, but when I put this course together, there's a lot of work to it and a lot of moving parts. And the new edition you got is the 19th edition, and bless their heart, this publisher seems like every 18 months is putting out a new book. So you'll find often in some of the things I refer to a different page number or chapter number, but don't let it upset you. Just go to the index, you'll find the topic. They haven't cut the materials out, they just moved it to a different page. It's in there. But the text is a great text. It's a good keeper text. I encourage you to keep it, take it with you, put it on your bookshelf in your office. They've got great aid to memoirs and things in there. It doesn't have a lot of critical thinking, but it's a great checklist, so it's a book to hang on to. 50% of the course is my materials. You'll not find it in the text. It's just stuff we'll talk about as we proceed between the two of them. But I just put that caveat out there. Don't get frustrated over the difference in page numbers. Not much I can do about it. There's no way you could have a course like this, as rich as it is with the media and interaction, if it had to be changed every 6 months, because they keep changing the edition of the text, and they have changed it. If you just go back and look, almost every 18 months there's a new book coming out. Now, having said that, this session is about a strategist's perspective, trying to get your mind right before we start strategy on how you're supposed to think. And this idea of the online booking, transforming the travel agency, impacts my mind, along with the idea of it says why banks feel very, very afraid. And here the bankers talking about the threat by I think it's Google and Facebook. Google and Apple are breathing down the banks, trying to start a whole new banking industry of online banking, and things like PayPal and Apple Pay. Those sort of things are coming in, and this all speaks to something that we need to be aware of, and that's the Internet of Things. And the Internet of Things is this interconnectivity that we have on everything we do. There's over 50 billion sensors are going to be here within 4 years. 50 billion sensors, and we're all going to be linked. And I mean, I can just ramble for a few minutes. We're talking about, I read an article the other day of if you can picture a dish for solar power that's lasered down to the collectors on the Earth, that's 200 miles up over our heads. And I'm not talking a baby dish, I'm talking a dish the size of 5 or 6 football fields snapped together. This is significant size, but it's 24 hours a day shooting electricity at a good price down to Earth. That's going to be transformational on the fossil fuel industry. We need to look at that. We need to look at Google. Google are putting these electric cars together. They're almost out here now. They're just around the corner. They're not like 20 years out. They're getting ready to come to us, and certainly in 10 years, I suspect the Google car is something we're going to be much more familiar with. And we're not going to call it cars. To me, it's a mobile office that you're going to get in, give direction where you want to go, and then everything is there for you. You can do your office work in this little box that'll take you from point A to point B. And if you take the drones, we now control drones electronically. All the American drones, and drones are a big issue. In fact, Amazon delivering things are now getting drones up to 400 feet off the ground coming in. It's not a quantum leap to see these automobiles, these mobile offices, actually elevated and going on channels to move from point A to point B. We talk about 3D printing of organs, which is coming, and they're underway now as we talk, growing ears, and a little harder on kidneys, but they're doing kidneys and pancreases and things of this nature. The University of Alberta has started this sort of process of looking at this. The idea of a computer chip in your leg, your hand, whatever it happens to be. They're doing this now. People get released from Guantanamo, but they have a chip in their back that wherever these folks go in the world, they're being followed and monitored. We're not far away, and we can have this discussion about privacy and not wanting it, and I'm one of those that speak against it, but the reality is, folks, that we're getting everything. Samsung televisions, the new televisions, whether you like it or not, they have the ability to watch you and record what you're saying and do the analytics on that as to what you liked and what you didn't like. Cars at the present time, we have this star service that if you want to, something goes wrong in your car, you can immediately just start talking to somebody there, and equally, theoretically, they have the ability to shut down your car at any particular point they want to, and theoretically they can speed it up and put the brakes on. All this is just around the corner, and so are you ready for the Internet of Things, and how is it going to impact your daily life, and are you ready for it in your businesses, and more importantly, from a strategist's perspective, how are you going to take advantage of that? Because the reality is, folks, let me even go further if I can for a few seconds on that. It's so important when you think of the Internet of Things. I want you to think for a minute that I'm seeing that we have the capitalist model, but the capitalist model is starting to get a high rate of change because the Internet of Things. I'm going to suggest to you that because of this collaborative commons that the internet provides, that the old model of capitalism, that's this, if you can imagine, that this curve that comes down and slightly to the right, but the economies of scale kick in for the number of units you produce over time. The cost keeps coming down, the more efficient, the more learning, the more you produce, the cost comes down up to a point that you kind of bulk out and goes up. So, for example, if you had a hamburger facility, up to a certain point, you can produce hamburgers, and the cost per hamburger comes down until like 10 buses roll up the front of your place, and that throws up your production operations management to such thing that the price then chug-lugs back up. But that's the traditional capitalist model, and we all strive to get down that learning curve, that economy of scale curve, efficiency curve as fast as we can. But under this new model, the Internet of Things is making it such that it's almost zero-based, zero marginal-based economy. That this newspaper, it costs the money for this paper to be produced, and it comes down that curve just like I talked in the traditional model. But if you do this in line, the 7.2 billion people in the world today can read this paper. So it's zero marginal cost because it's a collaborative commons. And this goes on almost to everything, whether it be music, shows, education. I mean, you don't need this school to come into this place and sit in bricks and mortars. I mean, it's nice for the bonding aspect of it. But right now, Wharton has got these massive online courses. They've put almost 8 million people, and they're free. You can take a strategy course at Wharton tomorrow, sign up for it, and you can attend and get the same sort of instruction from a Wharton instructor, and doesn't charge you a penny. And that's all part of this new way we're doing it. I mean, do you have to come into this sort of environment, and or can you take little, like this course, can you take little parcels here and there and bits and pieces of it and take them at your time and your pleasure? And so this Internet of Things is changing the way we're going to think about things, this collaborative commons, we're sharing things more and more. And so the whole new business models are going to have to be redeveloped, this strategist perspective. We can't rely on the industrial age tools of traditional way of thinking. And I raised the point in here that if you look at the Pike's Fish Market little story, we end up with individuals there that how do you harness the energy of one person? And if you believe one person makes a difference to your bottom line, how do you measure that one person? It's not return on investment. It's not the traditional 5 categories of ratios that are in your little black book. But we've got to develop some new metrics to do all this. And so we'll talk some of this as we go through the course, but I'd like to talk a little bit about the Internet of Things on your daily lives and changes it makes, and a bit more discussion as to how big this is. Oh, good. Well, I hope you enjoyed that Internet of Things. Once again, I encourage you to have a look in the bonus section. You'll find another about a 30-minute clip in there with some wonderful PowerPoints on the topic. But each one of you are going to be challenged by the Internet of Things and how you run your business. And it's something you cannot avoid trying to understand, because you can't craft strategy without a full understanding of the Internet of Things, the impact it's going to have in your business as we go through this. Well, that completes today's little session. I hope you enjoyed it and got some value from it. Remember, just 2 meaningful posts, all required on the discussion site each week. Put more in if you wish. Be glad to work with you on that. But just give me 2 meaningful little chats. I'm available to you anytime. I give you my phone number. Call anytime. Say hello. I'm there for you, including the weekends, generally from noontime till 5 on both days. Give me a call if you need help or just want to chat, and I'll be there working with you. So enjoy the course. It's going to be a fun ride for all of us. Bye now.